reality is, and you saw the figures, Texas is growing, our population is growing, the number of vehicles on our roads are growing, but the money we've committed to to fund those roads keeps going down. This past year, our revenue has not met the previous year's levels. 2.91% is what it went down. Now, why is that? People are still buying fuel, but they're getting better gas mileage in their cars. They're getting more fuel efficient vehicles. We have electric vehicles that don't use any fossil fuels. And so while our gas revenues are going down, our needs keep going up. And that's the challenge. You know, we haven't adjusted our fuel tax since 1991. And when we talk about diversions, I'm going to talk about it a little bit more here. We talk about diversions. The state of Texas has 20 cents a gallon. Well, 5 cents of that goes to education. We're not talking about that 5 cents. Education's still going to get their 5 cents. The 15 cents is what we're talking about here. That hasn't been adjusted since 1991. Our registration fees have not been adjusted since 1985. The amount of money that you pay for your vehicle to be registered by the state of Texas has not changed since 1985. Now, the average consumer in Texas pays about $51 in registration fees. That's the actual passenger registration charge for a car is about $51. Now, that hasn't changed. My daughter, who lives in Denver, Colorado, has a 9-year-old Jeep Wagoneer, and she pays $350 a year to register that Jeep. In Texas, her charge would be about $42 because the older the vehicle is, the less money it takes to register a vehicle in Texas. So we looked at that. And we looked at such issues as, well, what if we don't do anything? You know, politicians tend to want to put their head in the sand and kick the can down the road and don't want to address certain issues. Well, obviously taxation and raising revenue is one of those type of issues. So what do we do if we don't do anything? We've got 1,300 people that are going to move to Texas today. 500,000 a year. We've got 80,000 new students in our public schools this year. You know, so how are we going to deal with that? So I asked various study groups, and that's what my committee has been doing. We've been looking at what is the cost of doing that. Well, you might be interested to know that in Texas, the average household in Texas pays about $1,500 a year in congestion costs. Now, what are congestion costs? Well, it's when you get stuck in traffic and you're wasting fuel. It happens when you spend 38 average hours a year stuck in traffic. Well, that's 38 hours that you're not at your job. You're not home with your family. You're not volunteering at the Little League or the Boy Scouts. It's lost productivity, you know, repairs to your vehicles. All that adds up to average across the state of $1,500 a household. If we maintain our current spending level and don't increase it, by the year 2035, that cost is going to be, on average, $5,300 a year. $5,300 is what it's going to cost every average household in Texas to just use the road system. And so that is a cost. You don't realize that when you're going to the local HEB store and you're pulling a can of tomato soup down. That can of tomato soup reflects a logistics cost to get it to the shelf. That's on a $1.89 can of tomato soup. That's about 8 cents. So every time you buy a product off the shelf, whether it be a TV from Walmart or wherever, there's a logistics cost reflected. And that cost is reflected on what it takes for the HEBs to locate a distribution center in Temple, Texas, or Kyle, Texas, and get that product out to Brownwood, to San Angelo, the middle of Odessa. And folks, the last time I checked, I don't think we have a very busy seaport here in Brownwood. You reckon? I don't see a very big air freight system in here. The only way goods and services get to Brownwood, Texas is through our roads. And if we don't have good roads, then it's going to cost more for our people to live here because their goods and services are going to be more difficult and more pricey coming in. And so that's how it affects each and every one of your households here in Brownwood, Texas. We've got good roads out here, and we've spent a lot of money, and we've got a lot of good contractors and TxDOT and road builders that work and live out here. But the reality is our paving qualities are going to go down because there's $0 in our budget to cover maintenance after the year 2011. Zero money. It's going to be sucked up in the metropolitan areas to cover their maintenance issues because there's not going to be any new road money. Hopefully we'll find $2 billion to go ahead and finish out the Prop 12 bonds that we've already committed to. That'll make about $11 million, I believe, in total bond issued. Plus we have pass-through total financing that we're going to have to pay back. Well, all that simply means we've been issuing a credit card. The state of Texas has said, we don't want to deal with this lack of income, lack of revenue stream, so we're going to kick the can down the road and we're going to issue bonds. And we're going to let bonds finance road construction. The reason why we have such good roads in Texas is because we've always done a pay-as-you-go. We've kept politics out of our road building business. But over the last 10 years, we've fallen off that log. We now said, we don't want to deal with new revenue streams, we just want to issue our credit card. Well, we've got to pay that $11 billion back, and we've got to pay about $450 million a year in interest on that debt. So all that's $450 million a year that Lynn doesn't have available for road maintenance out here in West Texas. So what do we do about it? How do we end the diversions? Well, I asked the various study groups, I said, how much would it take if we raised the registration fee? How much would it take for every car to end the diversions? And I'm talking about how we fund the Texas Department of Public Safety and a couple of Parks and Wildlife and a couple other state level functions. $30. The answer is $30 per car per year. That's $2.50. Every Texan Texas that drives a vehicle pays an average of $114 a year in fuel taxes to the state. They pay another 18 cents a gallon to the federal government. By the way, we send $1 off to the feds, and they send us back 72 cents. So we're a net donor state. They're keeping our money, and they're not sending it all back. But I'm talking about the state. We spend, again, an average of $114. What I'm suggesting is we can end the diversion and put $1.5 billion new dollars back into the system to pay for the Texas Department of Public Safety, to pay for Parks and Wildlife, and some other legitimate state functions. And it would cost us about $2.50 a vehicle a month to be able to drive on roads and be able to get our goods and services to market. Now, I don't think that's going to happen in the next session, quite frankly. But I think I'm trying to quantify what it means to Texas not to do anything. By the way, if we don't spend any more money to build our roads, that is a huge economic benefit that we're going to lose. 43,000 jobs. If we don't do anything, it will cost Texas nearly $1 trillion in lost economic benefit by the year 2035. $1 trillion in economic loss if we keep the same level of spending for our roads. But if we spend $1 in road infrastructure, then we'll get $6 more in return in economic benefit. So it's an investment. So you remember the $1,500 I told you that every family it costs in the form of congestion, average? If we would spend just the $30 to increase $1.5 billion over a 2-year period, then that will result in a savings to each family in Texas of $1,100. So by investing $30, they can achieve an economic savings of $1,100. So that's the challenge. That's why I'm here with you today. What I'm trying to do is give my fellow representatives, and Jim Careford is certainly a great colleague of mine, a great representative of Brownwood, and he's a great supporter of transportation issues. I'm sorry he could not be with us today, but he is totally supportive of the effort to find whatever we need to support our transportation infrastructure. Now, what I'm trying to do is give my colleagues like Jim Careford and other senators, and reach out to chambers of commerce, reach out to the road building professionals, and give them the tools necessary so we can say, let's start the dialogue. Let's start talking about, we want to assure Texas will succeed in the future, and we want to make sure that there are resources for our children and grandchildren to have the economic prosperity that we've enjoyed. So let's start the dialogue here.